So this is another interesting idea I had and thought it wouldn't be too bad to go into a bit more detail about it here on the channel. Like my What If Daemon and Rhea Royce actually had a child video where I introduced the concept of my character Maegor, the son of Daemon and Rhea, heir to Runestone and the Bronze Dragon, as I like to call him, I decided to tackle another potentially interesting prospect with another one of the women in Daemon's life. As the title suggests, we'll be exploring the first woman we see Daemon have a real intimate relationship with, Mysaria, the White Worm. In the early parts of the show, Daemon and Mysaria were close, to say the least. She was his paramour, his lover, and arguably his confidant, the closest thing he had to a friend outside of his family. We don't really see Daemon be a vulnerable man in these early parts of the series outside of his interactions with her. He shows her his insecurities and seems to connect with her. When he's afraid of being replaced by Balon, she comforts him. When Balon dies, she celebrates his retention of status and power. And when Daemon is exiled, he flies away with her to Dragonstone. And this is where we get the foundation of the story I want to explore. After taking and holding Dragonstone for 6 months, trying and failing to get his older brother to acknowledge him, Daemon makes the announcement that he will take Mysaria as a second wife, and that she is pregnant with his child, which is why he stole the Eggman for Rhaenyra's little brother Balon before he died. But it turns out, Daemon is a liar. Big surprise. Mysaria isn't pregnant. She even says in the show that she took precautions to make sure she couldn't be pregnant. This is different in the books though. In the books, Mysaria was actually pregnant, if the texts are to be believed, as Fire and Blood is an in-world history book stated to be unreliable in some of its material. Regardless, she was supposedly pregnant with Daemon's child, but ended up losing the baby on a trip back to Lys, where she was actually from. Lys was a Valyrian colony, and in the books, Mysaria actually looked Valyrian, like a Targaryen, which is one of the reasons she was called the White Worm. But I suppose the show didn't adapt that because it may be a bit confusing for some people with so many angry white-haired people. But I digress, this doesn't really matter. What I want to know is, what if history, the show version of it at least, was different? What if during their time on Dragonstone, Daemon actually did get Mysaria pregnant? Maybe she didn't take steps to prevent pregnancy this time, so she is a bit more like her book counterpart. But unlike the books, what if the baby actually survived? We'll set the stage during episode 2, where Daemon and his gold cloaks have been holding Dragonstone for about 6 months. Daemon has sent his invitation for the wedding, stolen the egg, and announced Mysaria's pregnancy. I imagine a lot is going to be the same here, but I want to lay out what is and isn't going to change with Mysaria from the TV series as a character. The only real change we'll have with Mysaria is the fact that she's actually capable of conception and having kids. But other than that, this is still the same character we have in canon, and why that is will make sense in a moment. In this timeline, from this particular starting point where everyone is essentially standing off with each other on Dragonstone, nothing is really going to change just because Mysaria is actually pregnant this time. And this is probably the first question I believe needs to be brought up here, at least in my opinion. Does Daemon even know that Mysaria is pregnant in this new timeline? Now I hear all of you asking, why wouldn't he know Mysaria is pregnant? Well, in my mind, Mysaria might not have told him. Well, why wouldn't she? It could be very early in the stages of her pregnancy, so she may not have gotten around to telling him yet. But there's also the fact that telling Daemon about this pregnancy could be dangerous. In canon, one thing is clear about Daemon. He is not above lying or putting people in danger to get what he wants. He lies about Mysaria being with child to get a reaction out of Viserys. He lies about sleeping with Rhaenyra to force Viserys to marry him to her. Daemon doesn't mind doing questionable things as long as he gets the results he desires. And I could easily see show Mysaria holding this information from Daemon if she feels like her and her child are in jeopardy, especially if it's early on in the pregnancy too. Say she just found out and she isn't showing yet, so it's relatively easy to hide. And this could be interesting because whether or not Daemon knows, he's still going to use the idea of a child to provoke a reaction from his brother, and this may be why she doesn't tell him. In the show, Mysaria is a character who seeks security and freedom. She doesn't want to feel afraid, and this is why she gets in bed with Daemon in the first place.
I didn't come into your service wanting gold, the power, the station. I came to you to be liberated.
From what?
Fear.
And this is also why she breaks things off with him. Daemon, especially in his youth, is reckless and doesn't really put much thought about how his actions affect those closest to him, like Mysaria, by claiming he was going to take her as a second wife, something the Faith of Westeros is heavily against, and that she was carrying his bastard child. He put a target on her back. She's not like Daemon. She's not nobility. Her brother isn't a king who lets her play stupid games for stupider prizes. and gets away with it.
His men might not put the prince's head on a spike, but what would they do with the commoner he claims he's taken to wife and made with child?
In truth, there are a couple ways you could go about how Mysaria handles her pregnancy via Daemon, but this is why I could see Mysaria withholding this information from her lover. Daemon is constantly getting into things and putting other people in the crossfire. She doesn't want to be afraid for her life, and this is made even worse with her being with child. Women already have it rough in Westeros, especially those in Mysaria's line of work. Now add a bastard child on top of that, an illegitimate child of the House Targaryen, born from a prostitute and a prince practically ostracized by his own family. Who knows what kind of trouble this could cause, and Daemon doesn't even need the knowledge that she actually is pregnant in order to start something. For someone seemingly out for self-preservation, why would she continue to align herself with Daemon, along with her child? Who's to say his actions, if he knew the truth, wouldn't just make things worse? So, this is how I see things playing out. Since this is the show version of Mysaria, she recognizes the danger of being with Daemon. He's unpredictable, and who knows what other schemes he would come up with if he actually knew she was pregnant. If the kid ends up being a boy too, who's to say Daemon won't take his dangerous games even farther? So she leaves Daemon in the dark about it, and this, I believe, will come into play later and make things a bit more interesting. So episode 2 pretty much goes the same. Daemon makes his threats, Mysaria leaves, Daemon's propositioned by Corlys to go to the Stepstones, and he does. So 3 years will pass like they did in canon. Aegon is born, so is Helena, and Daemon comes back after his victory. He sneaks out with Rhaenyra, fails to seal the deal, and gets wasted. From here, I believe things will change a bit. As we see in canon, after his escapades with Rhaenyra, the next morning, it seems that Daemon was picked up by Mysaria. In canon, it's a very brief encounter where Daemon insults her for helping him, and then Mysaria gives him a small update about her life before leaving him alone, while he tries and fails to reach back out to her. Things will go a bit differently here. Having secured a better life for herself that is arguably more secure than the one Daemon was offering, this is where Daemon will find out that he has a child. Instead of Mysaria showing up alone, we'll say she actually comes with the kid she had. We'll say that this child of Daemon and Mysaria is a boy, and his name will be Mycor. Mycor Waters, to be exact, as he is a bastard born in the Crownlands. Mycor will add a bit more depth to Mysaria's character and her motivations. In canon, she says she realized that the skin trade would only take her so far, which is why she changed professions. Skin for secrets. I think it would be a nice narrative touch that a part of the reason she switched things up was to make a better life for her son. Daemon will probably try to deny that Mycor is his out of spite at first, given what Mysaria used to do for work and how they broke things off, but Mysaria may not care. She'll probably tell Daemon she doesn't care what he believes or accepts. One only has to look to know the truth. And since Daemon has been gone for years, she thought he at least had the right to know. Then this would be followed by Daemon asking why she hid the truth, to which Mysaria tells him what she did long ago. She wanted liberty from fear. And what fear is there like the one a mother has for her child, especially when his father seems so eager to jump into the fire? What would he have done had he known for certain? Would he have married her like he intended, kept his late nephew's egg and continued to hold Dragonstone in defiance, killed the king's hand and his knights and declared a war that would most likely lead to their deaths? The answer is simple. They weren't safe with Daemon, so she kept him in the dark. Daemon would obviously take offense to this and say you think you could do better as a parent, to which Mysaria will respond that she already is. We'll get a brief scene of hungover Daemon holding Mycor before Mysaria takes him back and leaves. Like in canon, he'll try to say more to her, but it falls on deaf ears. So Daemon has a lot more to think about with a bastard son in the mix. Though from here, I imagine things will be pretty much the same for a bit. Daemon will make his way back to the Red Keep, maybe a little later than he did in canon, get interrogated by Viserys, and ultimately end up exiled. He'll go to the Vale, and everything that happened with Rhea Royce will still come about. Now, with Daemon being single, we once again come to another question with the existence of his son. Does Daemon still pursue Laena? With Mysaria around and having his child, he has something that connects him to her outside of a past relationship. Who's to say he might not try pursuing a relationship with her again? He wanted to marry her at one point, wanted to have kids with her, even though it was all part of one big scheme. Maybe the existence of Mycor and the possibility of him inheriting Runestone could spark some kind of idea in Daemon. Perhaps if he could get a holding of his own, and maybe if he could somehow convince Viserys to legitimize his son, he could wed Mysaria, and prove that he's capable of making something out of himself. And I don't find that too far-fetched for Daemon as a character, since through the events of the first season, he very much has a point to prove about himself. But, if I'm being honest, I doubt this will happen, as knowing Mysaria, while she may not restrict Daemon's access to his son now, she probably wouldn't risk being caught up and becoming a pawn in Daemon's games again. So we'll say Daemon pursues Laena and eventually heads off to Pentos with her like he did in canon. Some questions that we could have after this with the existence of Mycah is, do any of his other relatives take an interest in him? Does Viserys keep tabs on his nephew? Does Rhaenyra keep tabs on her cousin? The Greens probably will, especially if Otto ends up being made hand again, as he doesn't trust Daemon, and that would most likely extend to his son. This leads to some questions about how Mycah lives. Is he ever invited to the Red Keep by his extended family? Or does he stay on the streets of King's Landing with his mom? Does everyone know he's Daemon's son? Is it common knowledge? Does he get respect for it, or scorn? Daemon was pretty involved in the streets of King's Landing, so much so that he was called Lord Fleabottom. Something that I find would be interesting is if Mycah ends up having this mantle bestowed upon him while Daemon is in Pentos for whatever reason. Maybe being Daemon's publicly known and acknowledged bastard makes him high profile in a way, and they pass it on to him as a result, since Daemon isn't around. Something else that would be cool is if they gave him a nickname like Lord Waters on the streets of King's Landing. Reason I say this is because I'm thinking of Jon Snow. During his time on the Night's Watch, he was called Lord Snow. It was a name meant to mock his heritage as a base-born son, but the insult became a badge of honor for him that people respected later on. It's just an interesting thought, nothing too serious, but something I could definitely see happening is with the existence of Mycah, Daemon actually has a tangible reason to visit Westeros every once in a while, instead of just isolating himself away on Pentos all these years. Bastard or not, Mycah would be Daemon's first child, and not only that, he would be the oldest child of the next generation of House Targaryen, even though he's illegitimate. When I say next generation, I mean all the kids that we see grow up. Alicent and Viserys' kids, Rhaenyra and Harwin's kids, Daemon and Laena's kids. If Mysaria was pregnant back on Dragonstone, this would mean he would be at least a few months or at most a year older than Aegon in canon. Not that it really matters much, but the point still stands. Like my Daemon and Rhea Royce what if video, I don't see Daemon just abandoning his child because he doesn't have a great relationship with their mother. This is still his son, his only son at that, the blood of the dragon, and I could easily see Daemon wanting to be involved with his life. Perhaps even taking him back to Pentos so we could get to know his sisters and stepmother. Mysaria may be okay with this happening, seeing as Daemon at this point doesn't seem to be playing his old games and tricks and putting people in danger unnecessarily. Maybe Mycah could even foster with Daemon on Pentos instead of going back and forth between his parents all the time. If Mysaria allows this, I imagine this could lead to some interesting dynamics within the family. Baela and Rhaena would now have an older brother. How would they feel about that? Maybe Baela likes him, but perhaps Rhaena doesn't, or at least he kind of asked her insecurities in the family. Rhaenyra felt looked over by Daemon because she didn't have a dragon. Her sister did, and Daemon spent more time with her than she did with Rhaena. With Mycah around, chances are Daemon is going to spend a lot of time training his son to be a warrior. So he may be seen as another person she has to contend with for Daemon's attention and approval. Then there's Laena. How would she feel about Daemon bringing his base-born son to live with them? Would she be like Catelyn Stark and hate him? Would she treat him with respect but keep him at a distance, or act like he's a part of the family regardless of how he was born? How does Mycah feel about it all? He's a bastard. Though his father is a prince, his stepmother and sisters are nobility too. He's seen as less than dirt in the world of Westeros. He's nothing. Like Jason Luke, but unlike Jason Luke, he can't hide what he truly is behind legal technicalities. He may be able to train to be a warrior, but he'll never be a lord, a prince like his father, most likely not even a dragon rider either. The Crown and the Velaryons may not be willing to take a chance on a known bastard and give him access to a dragon. Perhaps he has his own share of insecurities that come into play because of this. Moving from here though, we'll say that Laena still dies and the Driftmark episode still happens, but with the addition of Mycah being around. And this could be interesting because it makes you wonder, how would Corlys and Rhaenys feel about him being here? Corlys may or may not care, seeing as how he deals with the strong boys, though you could make an argument that that's different because they actually serve a purpose to him, which is furthering his ambitions. Then there's Rhaenys, who only seem to tolerate the strong boys. Would she tolerate Daemon's bastard being at her daughter's funeral? Or would she feel insulted? Now, something interesting I think about with the addition of Mycah is Vhagar. As a bastard, Mycah is seen as less than by the world by default. Someone like him isn't meant for anything, but he's still the blood of the dragon. Would he try to compete with Aemon for the chance to ride the largest dragon in the world? They're both pretty much in the same boat, feeling less than for varying reasons, and that they aren't living up to their bloodline. It's not too far-fetched to believe that they would have the same mindset of wanting to prove themselves. Mycah more so as a base-born son without the right to an inheritance. but I could see him not pursuing Vhagar out of respect for Rhaena and Bela. They are his sisters after all, and while he may be jealous of them at times, he may still love them enough to leave it alone. Now this could be an issue if Aemon still claims Vhagar. If that happens, then it's likely instead of it being 4-on-1, it'll be 5-on-1. And this could be pretty bad for Aemon, because in canon, Aemon pretty much won this fight. He was the oldest, the biggest, though they were all relatively around the same height, and he knew how to fight. With Mysaria here, Aemon is no longer the oldest and possibly not the biggest. This kid would be older than Aegon, and we saw how big Aegon was as a kid. Say those Daemon genes have kicked in and he's already bigger than that, if only by a bit. In addition to that, he would have been trained by Daemon too. So with a more effective fighter on their side, Aemon may lose the fight before a knife even has a chance to be drawn. If this happens, assuming Aemon loses pretty helplessly, maybe we could see a rivalry forming between Mysaria and Aemon instead of Aemon and Luke. Regardless, Aemon probably doesn't lose his eye, and this is mainly seen as a spat between kids, but one thing I feel would be important to note is what Kristen said in canon.
Kingsguard have never had to defend princes from princes.
That is no answer!
Things were complicated in canon because both sides were nobility, and even though Aemon probably kept his eye, Mysaria being a bastard and assaulting a prince of the realm is grounds for very severe punishment, even if he is Daemon's son. I mean, we saw what happened to Mysaria in Game of Thrones. The butcher's boy was killed for supposedly attacking the prince, and this was seen as justice. As a known bastard who is seen as less than dirt in Westeros, this could happen to him too, but knowing Daemon, he wouldn't allow any harm to befall his son this way, nor would Viserys when it comes to his nephew. I don't think Alicent would push for this either. Even if she is upset with Aemon being attacked like this, she may demand some kind of punishment, but I doubt it would be something as harsh as death or maiming if Aemon isn't disfigured. If he was, that would be a different story, but moving on. From here, we'll still say Rhaenyra is very wary of the Greens making a move against her, and still opts to get rid of Laenor so she and Daemon can marry to strengthen her claim to the Iron Throne. If this happens, then Mysaria will most likely end up living on Dragonstone with his dad and cousin, who is now his stepmom. We'll still have the same petition for Driftmark as we had in canon, and we'll say Mysaria isn't here for this. Perhaps he decides to visit his mom while he's still in the city. We'll say things pretty much go the same during episode 8. Lucerys is reaffirmed as heir to Driftmark, and he and Jace are engaged to Bela and Rhaena. Once again, I could see something very interesting coming out of this in regards to Mysaria Waters. How would he feel once he finds out that his sisters are engaged? Despite being a bastard, Mysaria is still a Targaryen by blood, and with Daemon being heavily involved in his life, I'm sure he's still got a healthy education of Valyrian customs and traditions. It would be interesting, in my opinion, if perhaps he was jealous. Maybe he's in love with one, or if you want to go there, both of his sisters. And this is where you can see how his status as a bastard truly starts affecting him. As a bastard, marrying noble women like Bela and Rhaena, while not impossible, is very unlikely because he's base-born, even if they do share a father. Realistically, because of his low standing, he shouldn't even dream of such a noble pairing. This could lead to him being envious of Jace and Luke, because technically, they should be in the same boat as him. Assuming he knows the truth, he would know that they are bastards too. And yet, unlike him, they get everything. They get to inherit the Iron Throne, Driftmark, they get his sisters, dragons, and what about him? If you want to get a bit shallow about it too, and add some darker layers to this guy, maybe he even feels like he's more fit to be a Targaryen prince. Unlike the strong boys, let's say he actually looks like a Targaryen. He fits the image of a Dragonlord, but yet he isn't one despite fitting the bill more in his eyes. And this could cause some subtle animosity in Team Black. This could be important when the dance starts because the question becomes, does Mysaria stay loyal? Does he have a reason to? It may sound far-fetched for him to go against his family, but that's all the dance is. One big family feud where brothers, sisters, nephews, uncles, and cousins tear each other apart for one big metal share. Now, to ensure he stays loyal, something I could see happening is Rhaenyra potentially using the idea of legitimizing Mysaria to keep him on their side. I doubt Viserys would have legitimized him after all these years, even if Daemon asked his brother to do so, if I'm being honest. And while I say Rhaenyra would use legitimacy as a way to keep Mysaria loyal if necessary, it would not be an immediate thing. Though she calls herself queen, despite being named heir by Viserys, Rhaenyra doesn't have respectable symbols of legitimacy like Aegon does.
Aegon Targaryen sits the Iron Throne. He wears the Conqueror's crown,
wields the Conqueror's sword, has the Conqueror's name. He was anointed by a Septon of the Faith before the eyes of thousands. Every symbol of legitimacy belongs to him.
This may cause her to hold off on legitimizing him until she can take King's Landing. If she could do that, with more symbols of legitimacy in her hand, more people will be inclined to respect her decrees and decisions. This may or may not sit well with Mycart if he has to wait, because no amount of hoping and wishing will win them the war. Perhaps this could push him to go over to the green side. The greens do have all the symbols of legitimacy and power. They have the largest dragon, Vhagar. They have the capital too. They look like rulers, and their decrees are more than likely to be respected. Now, of course, some of you may think he would never change sides, but if we're gonna be completely honest, Mycart as a character is a blank slate, and there is no guarantee who he'll turn out to be. Just because he's Daemon's son doesn't mean he's gonna be unconditionally loyal to his father. I mean, Aegon is Rhaenyra's brother, and did he give up his crown after being crowned in the Dragon Pit? No, he didn't. Mycart could be the same. I mean, this is a kid with nothing to his name. Truly nothing. He's the bastard son of a rogue prince and a prostitute. Based on that alone, he's less than dirt, and even if he was legitimized, he still wouldn't have anything to his name. His claims would come from Daemon, and Daemon has nothing to his name. No lands, no titles or holdings, and even if he was legitimized, he falls behind his entire family in terms of succession. As the throne is passing through Rhaenyra, not Daemon, Jace, Luke, Joffrey, and even his younger brothers Aegon and Viserys would all come before him for the throne. It's not hard to imagine that he would feel a way about that, being dead last in succession. Maybe he would want to make something out of himself. Maybe he sees the Greens as an opportunity to do exactly that, since they arguably have a better political position than the Blacks do. Now, if the Greens would take in the son of Daemon is an entirely different question though. Post-editing Empyrean here, while I was editing this video, I actually looked back on things a bit more and realized it doesn't actually matter whether or not the Blacks have King's Landing or not when it comes to legitimizing Mycart. Rhaenyra is a queen in her own right, and her people value her words and decrees, so I don't really think she'd wait till they won the war to give Mycart a true Targaryen name, and I feel like Daemon would still push for his son being legitimate regardless of where they stand politically anyway. This is his firstborn son, and it wouldn't really matter what people thought about his legitimacy. The Greens could try to dispute this if they even bother, but ultimately it doesn't really matter what people think when it comes to Mycart becoming a true Targaryen. Though I still think the point still stands about Mycart potentially changing sides. After all, he is a blank slate. We don't know who this guy is since he doesn't exist, so he could really do anything because he could be anyone. But let's get back to the video. But something I could see potentially happening if Mycart is involved with the dance, particularly on the Black side of things, is that he would likely get a dragon to help bolster the forces of Team Black. I could easily see Daemon pushing for this, as Mycart would be his firstborn son and a potential asset to the team. And there are plenty of unclaimed dragons on Dragonstone. Perhaps Vermithor or Silverwing could be his mount, or maybe he'll do the unthinkable and tame the cannibal, if such a thing is even possible. All in all, there is a lot that could happen if Daemon and Mysaria had a son. This is a completely new character, a blank slate as he never existed. You could say this guy is Aegon IV and Joffrey Baratheon fused together and possibly be right. But these are just my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, tell what your thought down below, and I will see you all next time.